So, I have a confession.
All right. How long has it been since your last confession?
In this case, I don't know because I'm really bad at keeping up with local elections because I didn't vote today.
Ooh, all right. We got ourselves a non-voter, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone.
I just didn't. I had a rough week last week during early voting, and then I was traveling all day today, and there was just no fucking way I was going to go out there and stand in line for 2 hours and then record this show. So,
Dude, that's rough. Addie voted today. You know, some people like to vote on election. That's your thing, you know, do it. But I don't have as much respect if it's like you usually don't vote on election day. You just put it off till then. Like, just kind of, you know, it's like a slacker. But she voted today and was back in like 30 minutes. So I guess, you know, she was lucky.
it depends. Yeah, it probably wasn't that bad. Someone said the line was fine. Like, I don't know, it was like at 4 or something. But I was worried because I got home like right around 5, and I was like, it's going to be a lot of people getting off work going to vote. So I just didn't. And you know what? Fuck it. This is my little corner of the internet where I get to be bad. So
Hell yeah.
I'm not going to post this on my main, but I can talk about it with you guys. You guys are cool.
You guys are in the loop. So that was actually going to be my opening bit too. So we're going to be belated with this because when we release it, it'll be Thursday. But now, it's election night in America.
Woo.
Every communist's favorite day.
Oh, yeah, we're very into it. As you can tell.
So you didn't vote.
Nope.
Cool.
Yeah, don't.
I voted.
Good for you, man. I mean, I probably should have, but
Really?
Kyle shamed
I was wondering
me for
that.
it.
What are your thoughts on that? Like, do you know, what was your response, or like, what are your thoughts for the audience voting?
Okay. I don't feel like it's going to make that much of a difference considering like where I live. Like, you know, like my district is blue enough, honestly, without me needing to worry about it too much. But also like the governor race is pretty fucking lost here. Like there's no fucking way. Like it'd have to be like a plague that only hit Republicans happened for Beto to pull out a win. So I didn't feel like it was necessary, and I was having a rough time, so I was just like, it's just not worth it to me right now.
What do you think they would put on their doors? So if you had like an
Old Testament
Exodus style, plague that, you know, you had to smear the blood on the door. What do you think the Democrats would smear on their door to get it to pass over them?
If you asked a QAnon person, they would still say blood, but it'd be like children's blood.
Still, yeah.
Cold brew coffee, maybe?
Oh, yeah. Starbucks latte. Easy.
Yeah, okay. Well, the Republicans like Starbucks.
Kombucha. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a very late 2000s, like, latte sipping liberal meme.
Yeah.
For you kids out there, that's what they used to say about liberals. They're latte sipping. But like everyone does that now.
Yeah.
Okay, so you don't have a thought on it. That's similar to me as like, dude, vote or don't vote. I did because I got out early that day that I early voted. And I was like, why not? It was not a long wait. And I was like, I'm not doing any good. I'm not doing any...
It's a neutral act.
I don't think. I mean, there's an argument that you're providing legitimacy to the system overall by voting. Like, I get that. Maybe that's right, to be honest. But I just wanted to. I just felt like, why not do that, you know?
At this point in my life, it's like 90% funded by guilt. And like, I don't like that. I don't do a lot of things out of guilt anymore. I left that behind.
No, what you got to do is transfer over to like, change those feelings over to spite. Like, I didn't vote for anybody on that. I was only voting against motherfuckers. I was like, oh yeah, you? No.
Fuck you. I like
vote
that
for the
better.
person with the best chance against you. And yeah, it's like, yeah, I don't endorse these guys because they're just lousy Democrats. But like, it's funny. It'd be funny if they beat the Republicans.
Okay, I'll do things if they're funny. So that's a good metric.
Yeah, so that was my reasoning behind it. You know, if you're thinking of local officials that you hate, you can do the same thing. You can just be like, well,
that's fair.
I'm going to vote against them,
That's fair. I mean, I would like to tip Greg Abbott's wheelchair into a volcano with him inside of it, so.
Yes, definitely. Throw the whole man into a volcano.
Please. I saw this, it was like one of the Queer Eye guys shared this post about like, voting isn't marriage. It's not like it's the one that you're choosing. It's like public transportation. It'll get you close to where you want to be. And I'm like, well, that's a great metaphor because like our public transportation was like bought and sold by capitalism. So yeah, that's why it's in shambles.
Been gutted. Yeah, it's been gutted 10 times over. It's a shadow of its former self.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know if you meant for that to it's not like anyone out here is like, our public transit's so great in America.
Right. All right. Do you have any predictions, late predictions? Do you want to, show your whole ass and say, this is what I thought was going to happen and then be proven wrong or right later?
I have head empty, no thoughts. I spent my weekend just eating my way through Denver and reading fantasy novels instead of the reading we were supposed to do.
All right. Exhibit A, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone.
The himbo at work.
The healthiest American, to be honest.
Just be a thembo like me.
That's the best approach. Maybe not the not reading theory part. I mean, like read theory, but...
I tried. We'll talk about it.
Okay. But not paying attention to the whole thing, probably the best approach.
Yeah, I have no idea.
My predictions are that well, it's actually going to be pretty ill-informed because I don't know if part of my prediction counteracts the other part because I don't actually know the math. But from what I understand, it seems like the Republicans are probably just going to take both. They're going to take the Senate. They're going to take the House.
Why am I laughing? That's very bad.
Yeah, it's bad. But Biden will go in and veto very bad stuff. Probably if he's
sentient.
Got the brain cells that day. Yeah, if he's not reliving some, illicit act from his youth.
I saw he popped up on my feed the other day and I recoiled. I was like, who's this ghoul? It was a physical reaction.
Yeah, you expect him to say something like out of Fallout or something like, what are you doing, smooth skin?
Too many rats.
But the specific races that everyone's been talking about, I think.
Okay.
The Pennsylvania race.
Sure.
I bet that Fetterman's going to win.
I don't know who that is.
Fetterman's the Democrat. He's the guy who had a stroke, and then everyone's talking like, oh, he's very affected by the stroke because he was in a debate or something versus Dr. Oz.
Oh my God, I forgot about Dr. Oz.
So I think Fetterman will pull that out.
Yeah.
Just because that's literally Dr. Oz. But, we literally got Donald Trump being president,
There's no bar anymore. The bar is just shattered on the floor.
The other one, Warnock versus Walker in Georgia. So Herschel Walker, Heisman Trophy winner. Lots of stuff has come out that he's paid for multiple girlfriends to have abortions.
Okay.
But
sounds rad.
But is very pro-life.
Oh, okay.
He also talks about how he has pulled guns on people and stuff. He just goes off on wild tangents probably because of CTE or something.
Probably. It'd be really funny though if he was open about paying for their abortions. Was yeah, I'm really pro-abortion. Look how many abortions I funded.
No, but he's oh no, I'm still pro-life, but I was rich, so it's fine. He was just mask off. But I don't know. I feel like Warnock will win that one because he's well liked. His positives are good.
Wait, which one is that? The non-crazy guy?
Right. Yeah, Raphael Warnock. He's a minister. I don't see him getting taken down.
Okay,
but that's just stupid horse race stuff.
Who knows?
A little throwing it out there for you guys.
If someone there was interested.
Yeah, I'm a poli-sci major. You can't take the poli-sci out of the boy at the end of the day. So.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so far removed from it. I hear about it tangentially on social media, and that's it. That's all I got was just a bunch of just Instagram stories yelling at me to go vote, and me being I'm busy.
That's the best approach. It's really stupid stuff. I just, have a little bit of a mind disease in terms of wanting to pay attention to this stupid election stuff.
It's like sports. it's the sports for nerds.
It's sports for, very good. Yeah, that's what it is. All right, shall we get into the actual why we're here?
Yeah, I need you to explain this book to me. It was too hard for my Vembo brain, apparently.
No, so basically I hadn't gotten that far whenever you first texted me and said, this is dense.
Yeah, that was the word I used.
And as I went further into it, I was like, okay, I see what they mean.
I think I made it to chapter 3. And then I was like, then I texted you, I was like, we got to figure out a plan B here.
Okay, yeah. So we'll figure it out as I've got kind of summaries so we can go through it, and this will essentially be more of a TLDR translation.
Great. I could use
for everyone. Yeah, because
including me.
To be honest, this is Rosa Luxemburg's Social Reform or Revolution, written in 2 parts in 1900 and in 1908. And Rosa's got a style that is quite didactic, or she'll kind of like make a point and then really harp on it. So like you can take chapters, a whole chapter of this pamphlet, because they did pamphlets and chapters back then, I guess, and break it down into basically 3 points for the whole thing. Okay, well, she said 3 things here, basically, just with a lot of evidence. So
okay. I mean, from the chapters that I read and what I was able to parse from it, that did seem like the case. I was like, did she just take that whole time to say this thing she said at the beginning? Yes. Okay.
Yeah. That happens a lot here. All right. Do we want to do a little bit about Rosa Luxemburg's background?
Yeah, just give me a quick little, top of the Wikipedia bio.
Rosa Luxemburg, born in Poland in 1871, to kind of liberal Jewish parents. Joined the Socialist Party in Poland there, or like a Socialist Party there in high school called Proletariat.
Nice.
So it started early. The party was soon crushed because it was trying to organize a general strike. So, if you guys are in high school, you can organize general strikes.
Holy shit.
If you didn't know, you can do that.
Great.
But yeah, her life, she was a theorist, an activist, an agitator, lived most of her life in Berlin, in Germany. She was a co-founder of the Social Democracy of the Kingdom of Poland and Lithuania. She was also a member of the Social Democratic Party of Germany, which she was at the time that she wrote this. It is very Marxist, left-wing. It had like a left, more revolutionary wing, and like the reformist wing, which is what she's arguing against.
Yeah, that one guy that she hates, Bernstein.
Yeah.
That's it. She fucking takes him to task.
She is really cool, though. So she's fiercely anti-war, anti-imperialism, kind of calls out World War I ahead of time, says, like, man, these motherfuckers are heading to war, and it's bad. And she actually ends up meeting her demise right after World War I is over. She's a founder of the Spartacus League, which is like a rogue kind of anti-World War I socialist group, split off from the Social Democratic Party, which voted for war credits. And later, this group, there's complicated stuff, but they eventually become part of the Communist Party of Germany. At the end of World War I, there's something called the German Revolution of 1918-1919, which we could do a whole episode on. Basically, there's a mutiny in the army.
Okay.
Because German high command is like, let's go on a suicide mission at the end and just like go out in a blaze of glory.
Okay.
And the Navy is like, that's absolutely crazy. Like, regular
We're not
people
going to
are like,
do that.
no. Right. So the SPD, that's the Social Democratic Party of Germany. They're like, yeah, let's support the mutiny. They do this thing where there's like a rival kind of government between them and the communists. There's like Soviet kind of republics and workers' councils and everything going on at the same time that they have like kind of a parliamentary thing trying to happen. And eventually those two things grow antagonistically against each other so much that the Social Democratic Party that's trying to do this parliamentary government thing says, we're not going to have these workers' councils and everything. We're not going to do that shit anymore. The workers' councils are trying to, they do something called the Spartacist Uprising in January 1919, which is where they try to do a general strike. The Social Democrats call in the Freikorps, which are this right-wing paramilitary.
Oh, God. Oldest story in the book.
Yeah, they crush the rebellion. They assassinate its leaders. Rosa Luxemburg is tortured and killed.
I mean, ain't that like a social democrat to call in fascists to beat up the communists and then be like surprised when the fascists take over?
Yeah, so that's kind of how her life trajectory went. As far as this text itself goes, like you said, she's railing against this guy Bernstein. Edward Bernstein is his name. And this is because of essentially a divide within the Social Democratic Party. So a little brief background to this too. In 1878, there were 2 failed assassination attempts on the Kaiser of the German Empire. Neither of them were members of the SPD, but somehow they get blamed for it anyway.
Cute.
Because, if it weren't for them, then these guys wouldn't go out there shooting people.
Totes.
So they passed something called the anti-socialist laws. They banned the SPD for a long time, but it kind of backfires because everyone's like, oh, they must be cool. So it makes them more popular.
I love it.
Eventually, they repeal this in 1890, and so the SPD is trying to come back on the scene and then some of their members are like worried about scaring people and, we don't want to do strikes and stuff because people are going to think we're too radical. And that's like Bernstein's crew. They're like, no, we don't want to be too mean. But Rosa Luxemburg is saying like, what are you talking about? And that's what this whole thing's about.
Okay. They're like, hey, we just got like not illegal. Like, can we chill? And Rosa's like, absolutely not.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Okay, great.
So let's start at the introduction. Kind of lays out the basics here. Rosa says that the daily struggle for reforms to help workers in their day-to-day lives is a means toward the end, and the end is social revolution. The workers take power for themselves and free themselves from capitalism. She says this is not opposed. These things work together. One thing leads to the other. It's through the struggle that we build class consciousness, build solidarity. We practice our roles for the revolution.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Like if you are in a situation where you have, no time off, like then you do not have time to like plan a revolution. Like, that's an extreme case, but that's my shitty metaphor.
Yeah, you're planning, you're increasing your capacity, you're realizing what you can do when you're working with your fellow people. You're realizing yourself as a class, you're making gains, and at the same time you're running up against a wall. We were just talking about elections before. When you're participating in that, you're more active in realizing its limits, like what they will let you do and what they won't. And that will, over time, increase the numbers of people who say, this is good, but like we got to take the next step. We got to do revolution. So that's her initial premise. She says, okay, yeah, everyone gets that, but this guy Bernstein, he doesn't get it.
He says that you don't need the fucking final goal. He's like, we don't actually have to have socialism. We can just reform our way to good times.
Right. Well, even more than that, he's saying that these two things that social democrats have always understood, and this is, let's do a little terminology here, because we were saying social democrats, most people have in their minds the modern terminology of a reformist. But at the time, this is just a socialist.
That's what I gathered. Okay. That's just their name for socialists.
Right. It becomes the moderate reformist thing. That's what wins out, much to Luxemburg's chagrin. But like, at the time, she's just saying like the movement, the socialists, our party. She says everybody understood that these two things are united, but Bernstein takes them apart and says, no, they're opposed. Like, you can't, like, if you're doing revolution, it's taking away from reform. If you're doing reform, it's taking, like, for some reason, he divorces the two. And she says, that's bad. He says, we only want to do reforms. He's forsaking the end, just focusing on the means, just saying, no. Let's only focus on the here and now, the making material gains. Revolution, that's not a thing. We're going to gradually build ourselves there. We're not going to ever have the moment where we say, let's throw off the shackles. We'll just melt the shackles gradually.
sorry if I'm jumping ahead, but is one of her issues, it sounded like from the little bit that I read, was that if you are going down this reform only path, like you are negating the need, I guess, for socialism, or like, because like the classic Marxist theory being like socialism takes off when capitalism like explodes, like in a bad way.
Right. And she'll get into more detail later, but she says, he says, she says, he says.
Classic.
Luxemburg says that Bernstein's claim is that capitalism's not actually going to hit a general catastrophe. And since it's never going to do that, we should be focusing on improving it instead and making things better within it. And then gradually we're just going to like grow into socialism. And she's going to make an argument that really undermines the whole historical process of like what we understand socialism's mechanical causes to be.
Yeah, because it's like, I mean, this was in early 1900s. So he was right in some ways. Like, yeah, I did get pretty good at adapting and like, yeah, it's still around. Mm-hmm. But like, we all know like collapse is coming one way or the other. If it's going to be fucking climate collapse. Like
it had to wait a little while.
Yeah. Like it's on its way.
So yeah, that's the general opposition between the two. And she, in the introduction, she also says, Bernstein, he's out here saying, no, I'm a good Marxist. Like, this is Marxism. But she's like, he's just like using that as a cover. This man is lying. This is revisionism. It will hurt the whole thing. And she also makes this point that I like in the introduction, where she says, only when science and the workers, these opposite poles of society, become one, will they crush in their arms of steel all obstacles to culture.
I liked that bit too.
To me, that was like, her argument is you can't leave it up to the eggheads, the petty bourgeoisie to lead you, because they're going to try to take you down the petty bourgeoisie road. Like, they have class interests, aside from the few traitorous bourgeois intellectuals like us. Aside from the good ones, you have, generally that's going to steer you into a path, like basically you have to know some theory. You don't have to like be super nerdy about it, right? And it's kind of up to the party to be able to break that down to people and say like, hey, you need to know the party line. You need to know why we do things so that assholes can't come in and steer you off in this direction and say, oh yeah, that's socialism.
Exactly. Like you need, like sometimes I think theory is kind of an intimidating term. Like
It is, yeah.
I would rather we could just be like, you need to be able to name the good guys and the bad guys.
Which side are you on?
Exactly. Like that's one of the reasons I love that phrase, is because it breaks it down so simply. And we've talked about revolutionary movements that maybe didn't have that theory. Like last week with the Chiampi, it's like they didn't really know who the good guys and bad guys were. They're just like, I'm unhappy. Let's start some shit.
Let's find the first barefoot guy we can.
Yeah, they just handed it over to him. They didn't address like the system. They just addressed
all right, Lando, you're it.
Sure, man. Okay. So yeah, it doesn't have to be like your leader has to be a big fucking nerd or something. It's just that, like, you have to be on the same page.
Although it helps looking at you, Lenin.
I love a nerd. Don't get me wrong.
And Castro. I mean, the guy was a lawyer. So. Mm-hmm. All right. That's introduction. It's a lot longer if you read it. Moving on.
Great.
Chapter 1, The Opportunist Method. Essentially, what we're doing is I'm basically doing a running Christine's summary of the people thing.
Yeah, that's the plan.
It'll work. All right. So Bernstein's claim that capitalism won't decline. All right. And he's standing in the whole time that we're going to say, oh, Bernstein says this. Who the fuck cares what Bernstein thinks, right? He died a long time ago. But this pamphlet should be read as Rosa is standing in for the righteous, the revolutionary socialists, the revolutionary communists.
Yeah.
The real Marxists. And then Bernstein is standing in for the reformists who want to crumple that all up, throw it away, and start taking the easy path. In Star Wars terms, this is the Jedi versus the Sith. The good and the bad. Again, which side are you on? We're on Rosa's side. So Bernstein's, who cares what he personally thinks, but this is what the reformists or what kind of the easy path people will say.
Okay.
So Bernstein's saying capitalism actually won't decline. There's not going to be a general catastrophe because it's getting better at adaptation, and its production is going to become more and more varied. He offers some evidence for that, or rather Rosa spells out his evidence, which is the disappearance of general crises.
That's cute.
There's right, I wish. The credit system, employers, organizations, and better communication will wipe away general crises. That's one evidence.
Sure. Okay. Because we all know the credit system, extremely reliable, has never failed us.
Never. Yeah, it's done nothing wrong. Credit's done nothing wrong. Ask anybody. Another evidence of adaptation is the tenacity of the middle classes. Basically says that there's more differentiation of the branches of production, and that more working class people are pulled up into the middle classes. So this is going to help capitalism out.
I mean, that was true for a while, but not anymore.
Right. At the time, maybe that seemed like, and Rosa actually combats that even in the time. So we'll get to that in a bit. She says the final piece of evidence is that due to trade unions advocating for themselves, bettering the plight of the working class, that kind of takes the edge off too. So with these three things, capitalism's better able to adapt and not fall into a general crisis of being able to keep going.
We'll see.
Rose is really trying to just do the basics here, right? So that's his argument, and then she says, well, therefore, Bernstein reaches the conclusion that workers should not try to take political power for themselves, but should just try to better the conditions of the working class within the existing order. The way she puts it, she quotes it, it must not expect to institute socialism as a result of a political and social crisis, which Bernstein says is not going to happen, but should build socialism by means of the progressive extension and social control and the gradual application of the principle of cooperation. Translation, Bernstein says, no revolution, no overthrow.
Nice.
We're just going to gradually build into socialism. We're going to take the ugly clay of capitalism and we're going to sculpt it into good socialism.
How are you going to ask nicely for your rights? Like, that's not how these fuckheads work.
Yeah. I mean, you could have saved Rosa, I think, an entire chapter. She talks about that.
She needed me as an editor. Well, she needs you to translate, and then I'll be like, okay, well, here's what you're trying to say.
Wait, so you mean blah?
Fuck.
Yeah, we mean blah.
Yeah, you got me.
All right. So Rosa's basic counter to this in the initial, this is still sort of an introduction, is like, this is a big deal because Bernstein is not saying let's slow down because capitalism's not collapsing yet. He's just saying it won't collapse.
Won't happen at all. He's a stand for capitalism. That's bullshit.
Whoa, I mean, like, you're cutting to the conclusion is where she basically says, like,
oh, great.
Okay, he outed himself essentially as a backer of the bourgeoisie. She doesn't get to that till the end.
Okay, great.
Yes, correct. That's what happens. She says, this is a basic tenet of scientific socialism's analysis of capitalism is the growing anarchy of capitalism. We talked about this way back when we're doing Engels' Socialism, Scientific, and Utopian, is that term anarchy of capitalism just means like kind of the chaos of the disorganization, capitalism's competition, right? It drives itself towards its own demise. Rosa says it will simply become impossible because of those fundamental contradictions. That the other two tenets being more socialization of production, so like mass production, more people involved in that, creates kind of the germs of the future social order. Socialist production being also mass production, everybody working together, just not with a boss, you know. And the other tenet being the increased organization and consciousness of the proletarian class, the workers, as that grows, that's going to be what drives the actual revolution. So socialists say these three things are happening, right? Bernstein is saying one of those basic things actually is not happening. So basically, Rosa's criticism here is that by taking out that tenet and saying, no, don't worry, capitalism won't decline, it's taking away the scientific basis of socialism as like a historical development, as something that will like really need to happen and have like a drive pushing people to do it, and instead says this is basically just going to be a choice. It's going to be, at best, something that's nice to do, something that's a good idea, and so we should do it. So she's saying you're converting it from like materially necessary to idealistically a good goal.
Yeah. And it takes away, I guess, the urgency, maybe is another way to say that. Like, it takes away I think it's a helpful tool for explaining to people of like, this is an unsustainable system. I think more and more people are, starting to realize that in some ways. It's a hard thing for a lot of people to let go of, but it's pretty easy to like point that out, be like, yeah, this is a fucked up system, right? Like this cannot go on like this. So I think if you take that inevitability away, like that's a huge argument you just like threw away.
Yeah, because a lot of people aren't comfortable, and it's understandable that a lot of people aren't comfortable with major, fast, big, drastic changes. It's easier to get people on board when it's like, yeah, get in the lifeboat.
We gotta go.
Yeah, hit the eject button. This is the escape pod. Let's go. Everything's crashing. Versus, oh, don't you want to be nice to people? Don't you? Because people can come up with all sorts of rationales of like, yeah, but we should just give more money to the poor, or this, that, or the other.
Just go vote.
Right. Yeah. So there's a lot more ways of weaseling into kind of mealy-mouthed reforms if you deny the necessity of having to make a change.
Okay, so I want to ask a question. When they're talking about reforms and like working within the system, I'm a little confused on what they mean by that. Like, I automatically go towards electoralism just because that's what I'm familiar with. Do they also include, they talk about like people like trying to get better conditions, like workers trying to get better conditions. But that includes strikes, right? Or are they saying like you just ask?
No. I mean, this includes all of the day-to-day fights that the Social Democrats would be doing. So yeah, strikes, all sorts of workplace actions, pressuring people to change laws, voting for people to be easier to bully to change laws. All of these things, all of those.
So they're not saying like don't strike anymore. They're just saying don't do a revolution anymore.
Well, Bernstein's saying focus only on those efforts. Those efforts are what will eventually get us to socialism of their own. And Rosa's saying, no, I mean, do those things. That's good. That trains you. But they're limited. And the training you get in fighting for those things will help you when enough people finally realize, hey, we can't get it this way. We got to team up. And then we can do the revolution.
Okay, cool.
Chapter 2, the adaptation of capital. So remember, Bernstein said, don't worry, capitalism's not going to fall. It's very adaptive. This is where Rosa's like, here's why that is false.
Yeah.
All right, so we mentioned credit, and we had a good laugh. Like, oh, credit's your big answer, Bernstein?
Great idea.
Rosa has the same reaction. She's like, are you serious, bro? So, all right. The classical economics way and Bernstein's way of looking at it is that credit extends production. So it makes it easier to produce more shit by industrial credit. This is shareholding, basically stocks. Capitalists can use each other's money to produce more or to just gamble, to speculate.
Yeah.
It also facilitates exchange or like buying shit through commercial credit. So it kind of greases the gears of the whole system because it gives people more money. And so they can go buy commodities. Remember the M to C to M prime thing we talked about? It just makes that happen, makes that little engine run faster.
Because you can say you have fake money.
Right, yeah. So more people can buy commodities and get it from locked up in commodities, which is no fun. You can't buy a yacht with that. And it unleashes it into M prime, which is, oh, hell yeah, I got more money. I can go do rich people things with it.
Great.
So that's how credit really functions. But Rosa says that's not good for capitalism even itself. Like, it does make crises more severe and more frequent. So Bernstein says it's good and is going to somehow like make crises not happen. But for one, it increases production faster and consumption's limited. I mean, you can only buy so much shit. So like as production increases even faster, because it's like you're pouring the gasoline of credit onto this fire, you're going to hit crises faster. You're going to overproduce. Another thing, when you hit the crisis and they start shutting the plants down, everybody's out of a job, that's when you need people to go out and like buy more stuff to resume demand. And like, you know, it's Keynesianism. It's like, oh, let's pump up demand so everybody will start making stuff and jobs come back. Instead, credit dries up at that time. I mean, like, no one wants to lend money in an economic depression. So it dries up just at the time that you need it. So she's like, it makes the crises worse. And like we mentioned, speculation, that's just like bad. It makes the whole thing less stable. And she's just kind of standing there astonished that Bernstein would say, like, did those words come out of your mouth? Are you serious? So credit, bad.
Bad for us and bad for what it's supposed to be good for.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like anyone can tell you, right? And when she's writing this, people are reading this and just like astonished that someone would say credit's good, because there are people like on the bad receiving end of credit of having to pay back to creditors. But she's saying it's even bad on the capitalist terms. Like,
it's not even good for what they want it for.
Right, yeah. All right, the other part is combines or...
trusts, right?
Yeah, trusts, cartels, not like the drug kind, but like business
like monopolies.
Kind. Yeah, monopolies, conglomerates, we would also say all these things. Bernstein says, oh, that's good. It reduces the anarchy of production.
What the fuck kind of socialist is like, I love monopolies? Like, what the fuck?
It's astounding. The guy sounds like a complete and utter fool. But he says, no, it's going to be good. These guys are going to team up. They're going to regulate things. They're going to avoid crises. They're not going to overproduce because it doesn't make sense for these guys, you know? Like, it's kind of like thinking, oh, you know, crime, it's going to be better because we're going to have crime families. They're going to like team up and make sure that everybody's got their turf. You know, you got the boss of the bosses. Cosa Nostra, all that. It'll work.
He's like the people that get excited when like Disney acquires new property. Like, oh, hell yeah, I get to see the Simpsons and Marvel movies.
Yeah, there's going to be a new section in Disney World for me. All right. You know, not throwing too much shade if you're, you know, a Disney fan listener.
Yeah, there's no... It's just, it's funny to see people celebrating corporate mergers. That's all. It's
all right.
Horrifying.
Rosa says, okay, so these things are actually not good. They're a Band-Aid. They're gonna, well, she actually argues they're gonna make things worse in the long run. All they do to alleviate crises or whatever is they say, okay, well, we're gonna keep some of our capital back. She basically says that's fine as long as it's not the crisis. When you come to it, when you eventually run up against the wall, you can't just set down the economy and say no one's going to do anything until this thing comes back. I mean, at that point, people are going to take to the streets. So she says, like, that doesn't work basically as a means of fixing crises in the long run. She also says that cartels and combines and all this, they aggravate several antagonisms. So this is something that I actually like about Rosa's writing, is that she really is very dialectic. She's all about these antagonisms. So she's always looking at processes and saying, okay, well, you got this going on and this going on. And while it's doing this, it's also doing that. Like, these two things are in tension.
It's like the lever kind of thing.
Yeah. It's very, like, Mao is great at doing this. And his theory, and something I want to get into when we read more of him, is like, there are things that are held in tension. This is the basic thing of dialectics. And you can kind of see where they're moving based on their back and forth. So she says, okay, conglomerates and stuff, they aggravate the antagonism between the mode of production and the mode of exchange.
What the fuck does that mean?
Right. Translation. There's an increasing struggle between the producers, these guys who have all teamed up and said, this is the price now, versus the consumers, who are like, oh, damn, everyone's teamed up against me, and Comcast is the fucking only internet provider in my area.
Okay, so it takes away, like, the choice so that you are forced to pay, you know, out the ass for something.
Right, so it makes that antagonism between consumers and producers worse, is what she's saying. Same thing makes the antagonism between the mode of production and the mode of appropriation. This means capital, producing by capital, and labor, right, who gets... So capital versus labor also made worse because the working class is subjected to, even though they're greater in numbers, they're subjected to the organized, combined nature of capitalism teaming up and saying, like, who cares if you're numerically superior, we're all teaming up against you to keep you down.
Yeah, we now have more resources to hire, like, strike breakers and to hire, like, crazy lawyers and, like, whatever the fuck we need to do to keep you down.
Yes, yeah. The third one that she says is between the international character of, like, the world economy, globalism, or like a, and not in the right-wing stupid sense, but like in the this is a global economy sense. And the national character of the state. So she's saying, like, we can basically do multinational corporations and get around different little national regulations and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, see any company.
Yeah, so she's like, okay, your bright idea was monopolies. Bad.
I can't believe that was somebody's big fucking idea.
Don't worry, guys, monopolies.
Check this shit
game
out.
that everyone walks away from happy. All right, so that was another adaptation of capitalism that was supposed to help everybody.
And it sucks.
She also just says, yeah, dude, so eliminating crises, right? That's what you're promising us? Neat thing to promise us. And I think that this is pulled from, like, a later, I don't know how they did this, because this list is listed on my thing as part 1, but it clearly comes from the 1908 part, because she cites the crisis of 1907, which she can't do in 1900. But
as far as you know, she could have been psychic.
But she says Bernstein was like, oh, looks like there are no more crises because they're not happening every 10 years.
And she's like, what about this?
Right, yeah. She's like, so it waited a while, but there are still crises, right? So the time scales differ. When Marx was writing, it did look like every 10 years, but it changed. And she's like, also, these crises, their origins seem to be where capitalism is most developed, not least developed. So it's where capitalism has more of these features that you say will protect it, that's where the crises are breaking out.
What are we down to now? Every 2 years, it feels like every economic crisis. Like, ugh.
Yeah. So that's where Rosa says, ha, 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 to basically everything Bernstein said about how capitalism adapts. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's that whole chapter.
I mean, okay, I do want to, like, try to tie this more back into maybe modern times, because, you know, we're not going to go, again, find Bernstein on the street and be like, you dumb fucker. You dumb piece of shit. How
did you think this? Yeah, it's not about Bernstein being wrong. It's about, like, that sort of camp or people who think like him being wrong then and now. So yeah, let's tie it into modern day.
Yeah, so, like, who do you think is this kind of guy? Like, who's the Bernsteins of today?
The Bernsteins of today would be, well, it's pretty nice to tell people, like, liberal Democrats. So that's pretty nice. Liberal Democrats, like, that's giving them way too much credit.
That's the thing. I'm like, I don't even know if we have a Bernstein.
You sort of do. I mean, there is sort of a soft social democrat, democratic socialist. I mean, someone who is, like, really genuinely believed that, like, just electing Bernie would have done it all.
Maybe progressives is a good term.
Well, progressives, yeah, or yeah, they used to call them the Justice Democrats back when they were, like, trying to take over the Democratic Party, like, make it more like Bernie, like that sort of a camp of, like, let's just elect more AOCs.
Mm-hmm. The squad, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I do feel like I know a lot of people that probably would be in this camp. They would say, like, yeah, I think I'm a socialist, or I agree with a lot of things about socialism, but I want to work in the system.
Right. Their conception of it is, let's get the right people in there. Let's get socialists in there, honestly, and that'll change it. And I think that as we go forward, we're going to see that more and more Rosa kind of tears down that conception of it, of like, let's vote the right people in. Let's have the right policies to reform government. That's she kind of spells out the limitations of that. So I think that's a good kind of modern day. Who are we yelling at? Yeah, who's Rosa yelling at now? Yeah.
Okay, but I mean, I would feel like marginally better about that kind of electoralist plan if we also had like a robust worker movement or a labor movement in this country, and like we don't. So like you can't just play one game, you know?
Yeah, that is the thing. Is it would be beautiful if we had a political party, a political group, and probably we just need to make DSA into this, or some other party. I mean, whatever, but we need to make some sort of mass party doing the sorts of shit that the SPD was doing back then. Because, yeah, they are struggling with a reformist wing and a cool wing, but, like...
At least they're there. At least there's enough of them to have this conversation with each other.
They're in with the workers' movement that's literally doing strikes and stuff like that, and they're worried about being too radical to, like, damn, like, that's cool.
That's a cool combo to have.
Yeah, so that's a good point, is that we... really need to put together first the forces to have this discussion. Like this is something that we need to save in your head for once we have a big enough thing going.
I don't know, because I think I maybe just because it's election day and that's where my brain is and I feel guilty and it's just my little Catholic brain. But I mean, I think this applies to that. I think even saying like, yeah, we need to build up to do that, you'll have some people saying, well, yeah, we need to vote to do that, or like that's how we organize.
That's fair. That may be the American...
I think that's the American response, yeah.
The modern American version of who are we yelling at is people who say, go vote?
Maybe, yeah. Or maybe I'm just being petty and I just want to yell back on my own platform.
But, okay, to continue that translation, Rosa would say, no, I mean, like, go vote. Like, that's good. Do it. But, like, in that you're going to see what you can do and what you can't do through voting. It helps you see yourself as a class. I don't think she would say that voting is really super important to help you see yourself as a class, but still, that and organizing with people, voter drives or these various things that like lead up to elections, that'll help you realize yourself as a class. And then you get disillusioned by the election itself, and then boom, there you go, and you realize the direction you need to be going. That's more of our modern equivalent, maybe. Because we are, we're kind of wimpy, Americans anyway.
We're there, and we're getting there, and I have a small hope for the future, just because we have a lot of young listeners, and gosh, I hope you guys keep going. But yeah.
All right, next chapter, the realization of socialism through social reforms. Rosa says, okay, reformists, they say the struggle of unions will gradually win us socialism. Unions, pretty cool.
I like unions.
They are going to do it.
I mean, if you're going, I was like, well, what piece of knowledge do I have to compare that to? And I was like, well, the syndicalists, like, they're all about unions and stuff, but like, even they're like, no, you have to do like a big general strike. Like, that's how you do that.
Right. So reformists are like, don't worry, leave it up to the unions. Rosa's like, there's a limit to what they can do. Basically, they can't break the laws of physics, the laws of economics. They can't wring blood from a stone. The law she talks about is the law of wages, also known as the iron law of wages, which sounds cool.
I don't think I like that. It doesn't sound cool to me.
Well, I think it sounds cool in like a medieval sort
Yeah,
of
it's
like,
very Game of Thrones.
we're going up against the iron law of wages.
Like, that sounds like something a dragon gives you as a curse.
It is bad because it's essentially asserts that real wages always tend in the long run toward the minimum wage necessary to sustain the life of the worker. Keep them alive, keep them coming in.
I think we're lower than that now, but yeah. We're really testing the limits of the word minimum here.
So Rosa says they can't go beyond that because the capitalists will literally just close up shop and move somewhere else. So the best that unions can do is play defense against that, limit how much their employers exploit them, try to get it, not worse than that, try to stay alive, basically.
I mean, I would also argue, like, an issue with leaving it all up to unions is that, like, not everyone is a worker, Like, what are you going to do about, like, especially in Rosa's time, like, a lot of women, children, disabled people, like, you're leaving a lot of people out of the equation.
Yeah, and you do want to be leaving children out of the workers equation, for sure.
Why aren't those lazy kids working and joining a union? God.
But yeah, no, I agree with you. It's workerist, as we would say now. But she says there's even limits within her time, which is just that of you can't go beyond the wages. But also, they're really basically unions are good if they're dealing with wages and hours, those specific work time demands. But they can be reactionary if they're dealing with, like, how do we organize production, making shit, right? One, technological developments. Usually unions are going to be like, let's limit these so that we can have more jobs for our members. Think about, like, the Luddites and stuff, because technology tends to, in the hands of the capitalists, exploit people, workers, and their bodies more. So they're against it, right? It makes sense. But, like, for the general progress of society, that's not necessarily good. Another is the scale of production and prices. Basically what she's saying here is, like, if you leave this up to unions, they're kind of like teaming up with their employers against consumers and making sure that, they're raking in the money and getting their money in and they can distribute to their members. But that's bad for people buying shit, regular people. So she's like, just like they can't, they're limited to less hours, more pay. Those are basically the demands they can make, that unions can make.
I think there's more than that. I would say, like, safety is always a big one.
That's true. And she doesn't really address workplace safety, but I think that would be included. Conditions, shall we say. She also says once capitalism enters the bad one, the decline.
The black swan.
Now we're living through, probably. Unions are going to be harder pressed, barely able to hold on to the gains that they've already won. And again, I think this is where we are. This is what we're living through. So that's very defensive. That's not going to. How are you going to play defense into socialism?
Yeah. They're not pushing. I mean, there are, and I do not mean for this episode to sound like we're like there's no unions, and they're all like there are important, amazing people doing some important, amazing work out there. And
Rosa said the same thing. Unions are great. They're good. Yeah. They're vital toward the struggle.
Absolutely.
They're just not. They're necessary, but not sufficient.
They can't do it alone.
Yeah.
And they're limited by the system that they are in.
Yes, that's the whole thing. Is like you can't get to that next system just using these guys, but they need to be. I mean, they're a part of the struggle. That's us. That's the workers. Which side are you on? We're on their side, but we can't leave it up to just that. All right. What about social reform legislation? Let's do that. Legislation sounds good. Reformers say this is pretty good. This is a working class imposing its will as the state.
Sure, I totally feel that way.
You did the reading on Engels. The state, pretty good thing, right? Like the state, we're its friend.
No, we're against the state.
Yeah, Rose. Why
do you think Dave and Dan are parked outside of my house?
Yeah, I'm waving at him. Here you go.
What's
hey,
up, dipshits.
Waving the bird. Rose is like, yeah, you did the reading, right, bro? The state.
Why do you even go here anymore?
She's like, that is literally the state. It's a tool of the capitalists. Like, read Engels. It's there. And so she kind of breaks this down and says, okay, so reformists argue, Bernstein argues, that the right of the capitalist will be diminished through regulation. So essentially you're going to transform him through regulatory laws from this capitalist proprietor, I own it, I get to say what's up, and reduce him over time to just an administrator. You know, it's society's in control and I just get to kind of manage things. You get to turn him from Jeff Bezos to the manager of a Whole Foods.
I mean, no, there's just no way. Like, have you seen the egos on this guy? Like, on any of these guys? Like, a guy just bought Twitter on a dare. Like,
yeah, on a dare, probably not even going his way. Like, he probably didn't mean to actually get it.
It was an accident, and he's just like shitting himself in front of everyone. It's amazing. It's it's very. Someone compared it to the Titanic, but it was like, it's like if everyone on the Titanic was like laughing at the iceberg. Anyway, no, I mean, how? Like,
yeah,
there's a limit. There's a fucking limit.
Well, I kind of like the way Rosa treats this because she says, basically, this is not historically how it works. So she says, currently we're seeing a transition in the opposite direction of what you guys are talking about. Even in her time, she's saying the feudal notion of property, you know, or aristocrats, lords and
Downton Abbey.
And serfs. Yeah, Downton Abbey is, and that's actually a
that's
thing
the right time period.
Yeah, and that's actually a thing that the show kind of does a good job of portraying is the importance of personal bonds, of things being personally administered. Lord Grantham, this is a big aside to any listeners who didn't watch Downton Abbey, but like your feudal lords, and even in that later time period, they have a very personal bond to the people that they are lords over.
Yeah, it's a give-take kind of relationship, mostly take. But they see themselves as like, oh, I'm like fatherly to this whole village or whatever.
Yeah, it is fucked up, but it is a system of social obligations between the haves and the have-nots. And Rosa says capitalism as it rises is just throwing that shit in the shredder. Like, it does not matter your personal connections whatsoever. It's all a market. It's all just property relations, not personal relations at all.
I mean, I think if you want a more modern example, like if you think about like our parents' generation of you work somewhere 20 years, you really you feel like you're developing a relationship with the company, even if you're probably not. But you do have a loyalty sense. I think the older generation has that. Whereas we're like, oh, I fucking left so I get more money. Like, there's no loyalty.
Yeah, it's mask off now, right? And another version of this is like shareholder or like stockholder. Those guys, they are literally just, votes. They're just blocks of money.
They're playing the game.
Yeah. They're
not there for the right reasons.
They don't do shit but own the property. There's no personal administration. You don't see the stockholders show up to fucking Walmart and start telling the manager that doesn't happen. There's complete depersonalization. So she's saying like the opposite is happening. We are not turning these people into administrators. They're going from having some sort of an actual direct thing to do to not doing anything at all, but owning, but like saying this is mine and you have to pay me to use it.
I retweeted this on our Twitter, but someone explaining like the corporate world in these like religious esoteric terms. It was really funny, but they're like, their explanations of the C-suites was like, I mean, they don't really do anything, but they just kind of like are there.
Yeah. They are the priests reciting the correct incantations.
Totally. I think that's what she said.
So basically she's saying, yeah, legislation, we are not going to be able to transform these guys in that way. They're moving the opposite way.
I mean, if she had been around to see what's going on now, yeah. It continued in that direction.
Basically, at best, you can regulate exploitation, but you are not going to eliminate it through laws.
Even if we know that our current system is like I said earlier, totally bought and sold by capitalism. Like, politicians and corporations are the same person. The military is also in that little Spider-Man trio. Like, they're all they're all the same. So even if somehow you were able to separate those roles into individual people, which you can't, but if you managed to do that, you cloned some people, I don't know, did some crazy Star Trek transporter accidents to make them separate people, then, I mean, you'd still reach a point where, like, you have to go up to a capitalist and say, okay, now give your company away. Like, that's not a thing you're going to be able to do.
Right. The thing that makes me in charge of everything? Nah, man. I got better. Right? They're not going to do that.
There's just no fucking way.
All right. So that was chapter 3, the short and easy version.
I like this better. I like Rosa. I think she is a cutie. But wow, we didn't vibe literary wise. Maybe I'm just reading too many fucking fantasy novels and I was just having too much fun.
No, there's a mindset to reading this. So basically, a couple of chapters in, I stopped kind of trying to make note of every little thing that jumped at me, and it was like, okay, I got to read big chunks, and then process it as like, wait, what's the main thing she was saying? You know, it's like you got to get in the mind of like, they're gonna write a whole bunch of stuff, and I only actually need some of it.
Okay. I'm bad at that kind of reading. I'm like the kind of reader who has to read every word on a page, and I get really mad if I skip something. Like,
yeah, no, I mean, I am. This is me. Normally, Abby will tell you I'm a terribly slow reader, but I can do this if I'm functioning for a thing, and I've sufficiently put it off to last minute. So,
no, of course, you got to have the fire under your ass.
Yeah, there you go. All right, next chapter, chapter 4, capitalism and the state. Our two favorite things on this podcast.
I have a shirt that says I heart capitalism and the state. Like,
it's in the I heart New York thing, but it's capitalism and the state. Here, Rosa reminds us, as good socialists, good communists, guys, we all remember that the state is like
bad.
It's capitalist. And it's true on one hand that the state has gained more responsibilities over time. So she says, quote, it prepares little by little the future fusion of the state to society. All right. We all know that like states apart from society, that capital came up with the state to regulate society and say, hey, you guys stay the fuck down there. We're in charge. Right? And the state comes in and points guns at you and says, yeah, you heard him. She's saying as the state kind of gets these more varied responsibilities of like providing welfare or providing these different social services, that it's kind of like taking baby steps toward its future role of doing shit for people. So it's evolving toward being a tool for society, but at the same time, she says, capitalism, that asshole, is in here kind of moving the state more and more insidiously in its favor. And she says, at a certain point, and she says it's then when she's living, capitalist development has reached a certain level where the interests of the bourgeoisie as a class and the needs of economic progress of like the whole society, what would be good for everyone, begin to clash even in the capitalist sense. So what's good for the ruling class of capitalists is not good for like just the general economic development of everyone.
Yes.
Right, yeah. I mean, we also see this. She was saying,
very true.
I'm already seeing it then. Examples she gives are tariffs. This is something kind of that harkens back to open veins. They talked a lot about how, Western or industrial economies made liberal use of tariffs when they were coming up, right? And England used tariffs and the United States used tariffs to protect their domestic industries while they were growing. And then all of a sudden turned the page and said, no, free trade.
You guys don't get to do that. No.
Right, yeah. Open up your markets because we're more developed than you and blam, blam, blam. She says that when, she's looking at things at her time and saying, yeah, man, like they did that and they actually do keep some tariffs. By that point, it's mostly, and by our point, it's mostly agricultural tariffs. and saying like, oh, no, hey, this is our market. You can't come into it. I mean, that shit still goes on. And she's saying this is not maintained for anybody's overall economic good. It's maintained for specific capitalist interests.
Yeah, okay, so maybe an example we used on the show, I don't know if you can call this a tariff maybe, but a heavily protected industry would be like the food industry, like corn.
Mm-hmm.
It is not good for people, for sure. It's not good for the regular economy, but it's good for like a couple guys.
Yeah, and so we do it because the state is more and more and more and more their tool. Another example, militarism.
Ooh, my favorite. That's my third shirt.
Militarism.
Yeah.
It's just, thumbs up. Wars have gone from initially, so her historical analysis says kind of the brutal or the primitive accumulation of capital, colonization, imperial
this
countries
is mine now.
going in, kicking the door over, shooting up the natives, and taking a place for its plunder.
Uh-huh.
Capitalism versus the underdeveloped or the soon-to-be overexploited. And this is just, to us now, looking backwards, like, well, that's just the march of capitalism. That's just how they took over the world and made everything terrible. She's saying, we're moving from that bad phase to a different bad phase, which is the capitalists just shooting at each other. Right? of just these very developed countries now going in industrialized wars against each other. It's bad, like, and she's writing 1908 at the latest. It's going to be
bad.
Walls of bodies bad. But it's good for the capitalist class because of a few factors. One, it fosters nationalism.
They love that shit.
Let's go for the team. You're on our team. Class collaboration.
Ugh.
You're on our side versus the barbaric outsiders.
Ugh.
Yeah, terrible.
Yeah, bad.
Oppose that. Nationalism is only good in terms of wars of national liberation of oppressed countries. It's also good for the capitalists, war, the systematic, the organized, mechanized destruction of human life is good because it's an outlet for capital.
Yeah, I mean, that requires a lot of equipment.
Bombs are fantastic, man. Super expensive, and you only use them once. Ideal capitalist product.
Super cool, no problems.
Yeah, friend of the show, bombs.
Friend of the show. Oh.
Dave and Dan are writing that one down.
Oh, no, I bet they are.
Next, it makes it easier to dominate the workers in your country.
Because of the class collaboration or a different
Well, because
reason?
of the war effort. It was in, it's in Talking Union in the Almanac Singer's song. They say, they'll call every one of you a goddamn red. Sabotaging national defense. Japanese spy. They have all sorts of things to say, oh, well, now you're less than loyal because you're not on board with the war effort.
That's a good point.
Younger listeners probably don't remember this. I barely do because I was just a teen. But the War on Terror is a very good example of this.
Yeah.
You had to be red, white, and blue, all that. You had to be for the troops. Or else you were like some sort of fucked up traitor. So she's saying it's bad for everyone, but it's good for the capitalists for these reasons. Same thing with tariffs. So basically, increasingly, what's good for the capitalist class is not good for development overall. A good comparison is like when Marx and Engels write about the mode of production, like capitalism or feudalism or whatever. It's good for a while because it's correctly matched to what people are doing. And so Marx kind of writes about it, right? He's like, damn, man, capitalism's done crazy shit. Like, it's built all these railroads, and he kind of talks it up. So
yeah. He's
impressive.
like, that was impressive.
But eventually it becomes these fetters that lock the system into place that it's trying to break free of. And this is what Rosa's kind of saying is it's now holding everyone back to its own interests. And she says, when you reach that point, the state is increasingly called upon to enforce the domination of that capitalist class, to say, hey, we get it. This is not good for everybody. but we got the guns, and
so you're gonna fucking do it.
Yeah. And so the state, even though it's getting these more social roles and everything, is actually sticking to its true purpose of being a tool for the capitalists to enforce their will on everyone else.
Yeah, so you cannot rely on the state to be reformed because it still has guns pointed at you when needed.
But what about Parliament? Parliament, though, you know, like
they'll save us.
We get more democracy. That's going to be good. That's going to get us closer to socialism, right? More voting. Go vote.
Here's the thing, guys. I would vote every fucking day if I lived in an actual socialist place. Sure, for sure. I'm at every town meeting.
But what you actually live in isn't an actual democracy. This is what Rosa says. Rosa says is they've dressed it up to look like a good democracy. The state has these formal aspects that really look like, oh, I go vote for this person, and then they do the thing where, oh, I'm a bill on Capitol Hill, and then they pass the thing. It's got formal aspects of how it looks and real content of what it actually does. And she says, what it actually does is enforce a capitalist society. Capitalist interests dominate, and what it tries to look like is nice and good and democratic, and it pleases the people. But she says if that ever gets in the way, if the niceties, people start to focus on that and say, oh, well, you should really be doing this for people, and the people say this and whatever, you know, Bernie actually wins or what have you. You get to, you know, or threatens even to win, honestly. And then,
I mean, yeah, they shut that one down fast.
You know, but like if that starts to become too scary, she says the capitalists, man, that is out the window. They know what this thing is really for. They give you the niceties. They want it to look good for you. But if it gets in the way, that's out. So she's like, don't focus on parliamentary stuff. I mean, like, you can do it, but understand its limits. Is that when, like you said earlier, when it really threatens, it's not going to be allowed to continue.
I mean, there's always going to be a reactionary movement. Like, if you look back to, you know, a great win for labor movements happening in like the 30s and stuff, like what happened right after that is they started cleaning house of all communists. Like, they're going to turn on you as soon as they're able to.
Yeah. And I would emphasize, you know, why are they doing that? You know, why are they making concessions in the first place? You know, and I think Rosa would agree is that it's the power of the people in the streets. You know,
absolutely.
It's the fear of the alternative is why they're giving up.
They had like thousands of like homeless people in the streets, people without jobs in the streets being like, hey, fucking do something about this. And
yeah, no, yeah.
They had to do something.
Yeah, no, they were talking about the threat of communist revolution in Kansas. Like, I mean, that's where we're at. So that's the real thing that changes people, that makes things happen. And I think that's really the thrust of this whole argument is the revolutionary potential is what does things, not the little nibbling at the edges.
Yeah, because the huge mass of people out there weren't just like doing a voting drive. They were like fucking yelling at people.
Yeah, they were like, we will take power ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
In summary of this section, the state and property relations are becoming more capitalist, not less. So reformism, not going to work. You guys were saying, oh, we're just going to transfer. It's going in the opposite direction.
And yeah, sure fucking did.
She doesn't always have great direct quotes, but this one, fantastic.
Okay.
I want to put it out there because it's a great burn by Rosa. Well, actually, do you remember Fourier? Charles Fourier. He was a utopian socialist.
How you spell this guy's name? I got it. Let me see his pic. Oh, God. He looks like he just like ate a lime.
He's
just the wrinkliest mouth situation, just like. Argh.
So he was one of the utopians that I think Engels mentioned in his writings, and Marx too. I want to say in one of the chapters of Manifesto, he was like, "These utopians for you." They didn't really have the right idea, but she kind of tosses him in there with this. It's pretty good. So Fourier's scheme of changing by means of a system of phalansteries the water of all the seas into tasty lemonade was surely a fantastic idea. But Bernstein, proposing to change the sea of capitalist bitterness into a sea of socialist sweetness by progressively pouring into it bottles of socialist reformist lemonade represents an idea that is merely more insipid, but no less fantastic.
Damn, she's like, that was a stupider idea.
Yeah, you thought changing the seas to lemonade was stupid.
Check out this guy.
My man Bernstein, even stupider.
Damn, putting the burn in Bernstein.
Yeah. So she's saying this is impossible, right? You cannot change these gradually because basically the state is this steadily rising wall between a capitalist society and a socialist society. Like it's what's keeping us from that reality, right? She says this wall is not overthrown, but is on the contrary strengthened and consolidated by the development of social reforms and the course of democracy. Only the hammer blow of revolution, the conquest of political power by the proletariat, can break down this wall.
Extremely true. Like, yeah, why do you think they give us the treats they give us? So we stay behind the wall.
Right. It's legitimizing it, right? It's increasing its power. So that's kind of how she concludes that section there. Kind of a banger. Break down this wall. She preempted. I think Reagan plagiarized this section of.
He was a big Luxemburg fan.
Yeah, definitely. All right, we got to chapter 5. The consequences of social reformism and general nature of reformism.
I'm going to guess bad.
It's bad. Doing reformism, she says, changes the role of the party, the SPD. And again, this is engaging in trade union efforts and also parliamentary efforts. She says it's changing it from revolutionary, which again is this idea of like, these efforts are good because they prepare the working class to eventually take power. And they convince them through repeated failures that we're going to run up against a wall and the only way through is with our hammer, with revolution. Like, we're going to be winning gains and this is good. This is stuff you can bring back to your families and say, we've improved our lives this way.
Yeah, it's harm reduction for sure.
Right. But you're going to... there's a limit.
You're going to reach a limit, and when you do, we'll be here.
Yeah, when you do, you'll be here, and you'll be there with the knowledge that I teamed up with my fellow people, with my fellow workers, and this is what we did, and we can do more. Right? That's what she said. That's a good view. But the reformists are saying these efforts are good only because of what they do to change things here. But bigger picture, no. Bigger picture, these things here that they're doing, these little changes, are going to build up enough to where they make a little socialism for everybody. And that's going to be it. We're not going to ever reach that other point where we have to do something else. This itself will get us to socialism.
I mean, once again, good fucking luck.
Yeah, no, she says that when you do that, you are not just pursuing something ill-advisedly, but you are making both the trade union efforts and the parliamentary efforts of the party basically useless. You're taking away the real purpose of them. They are still going to be like, I guess, improving people's lives in a small scale, but the real purpose of them was that second part, was training you for the revolution. So if you take that away, you were just treading water. You're just staying alive. And we covered that before, right? Like the trade unions, they cannot get past just playing defense. The parliamentary efforts, what is that? We talked about they're going to strip that if you get too far. So you're going to, the way she puts it is, you're going to end up devolving into a, quote, policy of compensation. Basically political trading, making deals, just trying to stay in the game, stay at the table.
I mean, that's totally what happens, yeah.
Yeah. She says the logical consequences of such a program is necessarily disillusionment. It's just saying, like, what the fuck are we even here for?
Yeah, for sure.
So that's the main point she's making there. Then she kind of shifts back to a little bit more burning of Bernstein here. Poor guy.
All right.
And she says, Bernstein, he's kind of foolish for saying that these things that he's been claiming, oh, they're good, they help, basically he's detaching them from their real role in capitalism as a system. He's like, oh, credit, well, it does this good thing. But Rosa's like, actually, it develops like the capitalist process and makes that worse. So it's bad. Or Bernstein's like, oh, boo, like crises, like let's get rid of crises. They're bad, like if we fix that, then everything's going to be fine. But Rosa's like, capitalism, the system that you're going for right now, that you're saying, oh, let's just fix it into socialism. Capitalism relies on crisis. This isn't something that capitalists like to talk about, but it does.
Yeah, so they can swoop in there.
Yeah. This is, Marx's term is the tendency of the rate of profit to fall. Essentially, as that happens, these crises grow, and a capitalist economist, Schumpeter, calls those creative destruction. Let's just say a nice, a flowery way to talk about lots of people getting thrown out of work and not being able to survive. But basically, the markets, they just let a little blood fly so that they can come in there, buy when there's blood on the ground is the phrase, and that will bring profits roaring back. You occasionally, kill off a few just so you can keep the overall thing going.
I mean, again, the question is for fucking who? Like, who is swooping in and getting these, like, profits? Like, it's not normal people. It's fucking vultures.
It is, yeah. And Rosa says that's just how capitalism works. I mean, like, it is. It's like forest fires or whatever, like lightning strikes and stuff, like the ashes, they revitalize the whole thing. She's like, that's how it works. That's how it drives forward. If Bernstein is calling for an end to capitalist crises, that stops the whole engine. Like, he likes it. He likes, capitalism to keep doing its thing, but he's basically saying, yeah, what if we just stop it? And she ends by calling him a vulgar bourgeois economist.
Oh, God. That should be on his grave.
Loving father, devoted husband, vulgar bourgeois economist. Makes him sound like he's saying, okay, here's the fucking supply line, here's the fucking demand line.
Oh, he just like, all of his graphs are like in the shape of dicks.
How vulgar. But yeah, she's like, the only way he can come to his conclusions is by seeing the world through the lens of a small capitalist, of an individual capitalist, of saying like, oh, well, like, monopolies are good because maybe I'll be in a monopoly sort of thing. Of like, he has this limited view, is what she's saying. And that's the end of that chapter. Moving to chapter 6, economic development and socialism. So she starts out this chapter by saying, hey guys, socialism, it's cool, right? It's cool because it's got these scientific foundations. It's based in an understanding of the economy in terms of its material economic conditions, right? It's not just a good idea. It's not just nice to do. It's an analysis of history as it has developed. She's saying, we all get that, right? Duh, like you're reading the same thing I am.
You get it, right?
Yeah. All right. And she's like, Bernstein, dumbass doesn't understand this.
Someone besides me did not do the reading this week, and it was Bernstein.
She really trash talks him. Some study that he did, some analysis that he did, and just calls him out. She says, it's surprising that Bernstein has so little acquaintance with his material, and it's astonishing how poorly he utilizes the existing data in his own behalf.
Damn. Okay. I do not want to get on Rosa's bad side.
No, she will rip you a new one.
She will murder me. She'll be like, they didn't read my book. Fuck them. I'm going to write another book about how shitty they are.
So there's a lot of like specifics that we don't need to get into because it's old data. But essentially Bernstein was talking about how, there's more shareholding. There's more like stocks and stuff in economy. And she tries to kind of correct it and point out, okay, yeah, what does this mean? This means that there's more socialization of production in capitalism, right? There's more people coming together to produce shit. Well, she's like, that doesn't refute Marxism, bro. That's like what Marx said would happen. She has this quote that I think is interesting. It's essentially like a Supreme Court quote about like corporations or people. Because she says, the economic notion of capitalist no longer signifies an isolated individual. The industrial capitalist of today is a collective person composed of hundreds and even of thousands of individuals. The category capitalist has itself become a social category. It's become socialized within the framework of capitalist society.
Ugh, so, it's like the worst Voltron ever.
Right, yeah, it's bad, but she's honestly assessing the situation even back then of like corporations in this way are this Frankenstein of a person.
Entity. This horrifying entity.
Yeah. And so that development is going just as Marx predicted, basically. Bernstein also, she says, dumbass, because he is focusing on, instead of relations of production, he's focusing on, like, do you have enough money to invest? So basically, this guy sees the world as, like, teeming with capitalists. There's capitalists everywhere because people have enough money to, like, buy some stocks. Instead of looking at, are these people, like, literally putting their money into, like, owning the means of production and, like, producing shit themselves? Or are they just like putting it in a fancier version of a bank to make more money off of it?
So is she saying that Bernstein is confusing people owning stocks with owning production?
Yeah. So she's saying Bernstein's focused so much on that basically he breaks it down to like rich people versus poor people instead of like capital versus labor, like the relations of production of like, are you a boss with employees or are you working for somebody? Instead, he just kind of, what she says, vulgarizes it or just makes it oversimplified into just like, hey man, look at all these people with money. Like, that's clearly, there's capitalists all over the place, you know?
Okay. So she's saying he doesn't have the correct analysis of that, the class analysis.
Yeah. She also says that Bernstein kind of crudely breaks it down to just being about numbers, which she finds kind of funny. She's like, this dude, he's always talking about that there's this bad group called the Blankists or the Blanquists. I don't really know how to say it specifically, but Blanqui was like this very conspiratorial, let's do a coup, take power, my small little group of coup guys, let's take power, and then we're just going to do socialism. Right?
Sounds great.
Yeah. Without like worrying about if society ready for it, nothing of that. You know, don't connect with the masses. Just we'll do it, and then we'll make socialism. You. Yeah, that's Blanquism. So she's like, that's funny because like that's essentially how the Blanquists think. Like, let's just, it's all about numbers. Let's just take power, and then make things happen. It's just violence. Like, do we have the numbers for it? And Bernstein's like, oh no, we don't have the numbers for it, so we can't do it. And she's like, dude, you would be better off if you were relying on science, scientific socialism. Like, history develops in a certain way. Eventually, it's going to become economically necessary for us to go into socialism. It doesn't matter if you have like an interesting coup going on. Like, it's a process. Like, that's what we should be relying on. The masses, not some little scheme. Not, are there more capitalists or not? Like, that's not what we should be calculating.
Well, I mean, even if you did, it sounds like his numbers would be wrong because, like, he's confusing. Like, he doesn't know how to count class.
Yeah. Because we said, which side are you on? But he doesn't even have the right equation for that.
He doesn't know what the sides are.
Right, yeah.
He's like,
My
confused.
man is lost on all fronts. Bernstein.
Oh, guy.
Yeah.
I'm going to look up a pic of this guy just so I know who we're making fun of. He looks like just a fuzzy old man.
Yeah, he looks nice, to be honest.
He does kind of look like a nice grandpa.
But he was stupid.
We're kicking this grandpa's ass.
Rosa was like, fuck you, grandpa.
Fuck off, Gramps. Get it together.
Another criticism she levels is that Bernstein says that, hey, yeah, there's anarchy in capitalist production, like there's a little bit of that chaos, but it's small enough that it can be reformed, right? Like, that's the whole premise of like, we can fix this. It's not too bad. You were talking about the Titanic before. So it's not that big of a leak, right? She actually likens this to some writing of Marx that I didn't look up, but sounds hilarious, where Marx talks of the virgin who had just a very small child.
Everything but. Oh, that's great.
It was, I had a child, but it's very small.
It's fine. Don't worry. I mean, don't ask too many questions.
so just a little bit of anarchy of production. And Rosa says, come on, like, your reforms of that are not going to work. Because you can't just say that, oh, you're going to have a different mode of exchange versus a mode of production. She leaves it at that. I don't really know specifically what she means. She does not elaborate.
Okay.
Just says, boom, that's...
She says you're wrong.
You can't separate these things. Like, you just, no. I think what she's saying is, like, Marx is writing on mode of production, like capitalism and stuff. Capitalist mode of production is going to have a capitalist mode of exchange. So capitalists are not going to be like, go down to the central warehouse that's controlled by the people and you're just going to distribute it for free. That doesn't make the engine run.
You can't tell companies how much to make of things because they want to control how much to make of things so they can make money.
Right, yeah. So those things are tied together. You couldn't go to the feudal lord and lady and they're just like, go down to the market and buy it from the merchants and capitalist system. It doesn't work.
It doesn't make any sense. Yeah,
right.
Like, so the whole point of capitalism is supply and demand. They're not going to just let that one go, y'all.
Right, and to imagine that you can reform your way out of it is to imagine that you can change that by waving a wand. Also, here's where she ties back into what you were saying up at the top. Bernstein says that Marx's law of surplus value is just an abstraction. It's all in your head, man. Don't worry about it. Do you know about Marx's law of surplus value?
No. I probably do, but I don't.
All right. Surplus value is the value created by workers in excess of their own labor costs. So what the worker puts in that the worker is not paid for. Yeah, you're on the assembly line or whatever, you get paid bullshit, but the difference of how much you get ripped off. That's
okay. That's
surplus
a
value.
much easier term.
Bernstein's like, dude just made it up. It's all in the ether.
What? Is he thinking like everyone gets paid all of the profits?
Well, that's the
thing. What kind of fucking job does he have? I want that job.
Rose is like, my man, where do you think money comes from? Like, Marx did not make this up. This is like, he's literally discovering like the economic basis of like money and the whole
profit of
way
anything.
The system. Yeah. He's like, he discovered this, dude. He did not make this up. And beyond that, when you're trash talking Marx, you've really taken a step too far with Rosa. Because she's like, come on, man, Marx, cool enough, smart enough to correctly analyze capitalism because he's got this cool method, historical materialism. He's looking at it as a phase in history. He's not a fanboy saying, oh, capitalism, here it is. We can reform it because it's the only thing we've got. He's smart enough to say it's a phase in history. It arose and it will fall like everything else. So he's able to step back and say, okay, well, what are its mechanisms? Here's what drives it. And then here is probably what's going to drive it into collapse, because you can like step back and do that with all the other phases of history. So it kind of unlocks it instead of being a bourgeois historian and saying, well,
this is the way the world is now.
Right. Our history developed logically toward the path of the greatest possible of all possible worlds, and we're living in it, and here's capitalism.
We did it.
It's great. Yeah. Finally, she attacks Bernstein for criticizing Marx. Again, don't do that around Rosa.
Don't do that with her. She will fucking cut you.
Because Bernstein's like, oh yeah, Marx, man. He's always doing dualism. He's like saying, oh, there's this versus that and this versus that.
So,
and she's
the thing that Marx does?
Right. She's like, dialectics.
That's like in the name.
What are you doing? Yeah. She's just like, that's just antagonisms. It's just dialectics. It's like Bernstein over here. He wants unity. He wants everything to be united. But what he really wants? He wants to reconcile his old, cool, socialist past with his current loser, bullshit, apologist for bourgeois self.
Damn, okay.
That's why he wants everything to be unified, because he's trying to work this out on the timeline with everybody seeing it, but he's actually doing self-help.
Oh my gosh.
It's a problem.
He's reforming himself.
Yeah, and she's like, don't pay attention to that.
I got the receipts.
It's not dualism, it's dialectics. Like, come on.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. Chapter 7. We're going to talk about cooperatives, unions, and democracy.
I like those things.
Right. Bernstein likes these things, but relies on them too much. So he says, okay, our goal is let's make the poor people rich. Rose is like, that sounds fine. Like, that sounds...
Sure.
We want that, I guess, but how are you going to do it, bro?
What's your plan?
Bernstein's like, labor unions, co-ops. It's going to be a 1-2 punch. Labor unions are going to suppress industrial profits, and co-ops are going to suppress commercial profits.
Okay, so instead of a store or something, I'm trying to remember back to our co-op episode, are they using it in that sense, or is it a different sense?
Sure, yeah. Anything producing something cooperatively. The workers own it, the workers run it, that sort of thing. So, Rosa, classic takedown of co-ops. To harken back to that episode that you were talking about, the market is ruthlessly competitive.
Yeah, how are they going to be able to compete with capitalists?
Well, by turning into an entity just as ruthless as the capitalist ones. So, I mean, you're just going to have to, be your own asshole boss.
Ugh.
Which, at that point, what's the point? Like, you're going to have to be as mean to yourself. At least make someone else do that, right? Like,
yeah, right.
To keep up. She's saying to keep up, you have to do that.
Yeah, because I think I get what Bernstein is trying to say is that, but if you have a really strong union, you can somehow drive down. I mean, you wouldn't be driving down prices though.
That's the thing. She recaps that, essentially restates what she said earlier.
Yeah, like that's not how unions work.
Yeah, she's just like, unions, they have a limit. They cannot go past that certain playing defense.
In fact, they want prices to be higher, so they're paid more. So then how are you going to have co-ops compete with that?
Well, the co-ops thing is, first of all, they're driven by the same competitive forces, so they're going to have to be ruthless toward themselves. And Bernstein's workaround is saying, actually, what do we have? Consumer co-ops. So we have cooperatives of people. This is where you have consumer co-ops, like people signing up to be a co-op member to shop at a grocery store, for example. These exist still. And Rosa's criticism is that this basically only works for certain things. Very localized businesses serving immediate needs like grocery stores. You cannot have a consumer co-op. Oh, let's go be the consumer co-op for oil.
Of steel.
Yeah, or
yeah.
Textiles mine. Yeah, the big dogs. It doesn't work.
Does not, no.
Because I mean, when you talk about that, you're talking about like breaking down the global market, and just kind of doing these like little regional. You're really scaling down what capitalism is in its modern incarnation. So she's like, that doesn't work. The co-ops thing, you're going to have to be as ruthless as the capitalists. So what's the point? Your only workaround is let's take this back to the Middle Ages. So it doesn't work. So labor unions, we said, it's got its limits because it's just basically defending against excess exploitation. That's like the most it can do. But that law of wages, that's its limit. She says, basically, it's a Sisyphean effort. You're never going to get past it. And I was interested in her explanation for why that's the case. She says, 1, the middle class is going to be more and more thrown into the working class. Just the grinding of capitalism is going to throw more of them into it. And that means more competition, right, for workers. So more competition for lower wages. So you're pushing for higher wages, but really you're just holding the line against that downward trend for, there's more workers. So
we don't need as many?
Right. Well, there's more workers, so I can hire somebody else off the street.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Because they just came in fresh from the middle class, right? So you're trying to push up wages, but really just holding them where they are because of that downward pressure. So the other one is increasing worker productivity, which was a trend in her time, is a trend still now.
For sure.
Increasing worker productivity. You're producing more for the bosses. So you're trying to get a bigger slice of the pie, but at the same time, your class is producing more and more. So like really you're just holding pace. If you get more of the pie.
Yeah, the pie is also growing. Right.
So you're like, just like, please, I need more of this. I need more of this. And at the same time, and we see it now, housing prices are going crazy. Rent is going crazy. And you're just basically trying to keep up with inflation, and you're lucky if you do. So she's saying that's why it's always a defensive thing, is because of these basic mechanisms of capital. So unions can't eliminate industrial profits at all without eliminating the basic mechanisms of capital, which they cannot do. Unions, doesn't work. Cooperatives, doesn't work. I mean, she's saying they're good. Like,
they're good. Again, we're not saying don't do them.
Yeah. It's just not going to be the thing.
It will not get rid of capitalism alone.
Taking that to task, said Bernstein, she quotes him here and makes fun of what he says.
Okay, great. Love it.
Because he basically completely admits to being an idealist.
Okay, cool.
So she's spent a long time kind of making the case that he is, but then decides, I'm just going to quote the guy where he says I'm an idealist.
Whoops.
His quote, "Why represent socialism as the consequence of economic compulsion? Why degrade man's understanding, his feeling for justice, his will?" She says this, that he's complaining, like, why, why do we have to rely on things like the historical progression of things? Why can't we just tell people it's a good idea and then tell them to do it?
It doesn't matter. I mean, you can have good ideas all day, but like, it doesn't address the core issue.
Yeah, and will it lead to what you need? Like Rosa says, we've done idealistic, utopian socialism before. Are we living in a socialist society? No, it has not worked. And she's like, that's weak. Another argument of Bernstein she brings up is democracy as being inevitable. That history inevitably marches toward more and more democracy.
I'm making a face right now, listeners.
I imagine that would be the same face that Rosa made saying, "You serious, bro?"
Let's do a quick health check on democracy.
You reading the same history I am? We're talking about the early 1900s. We're talking before the rise of fascism.
That ain't great.
So she does a little bit of history. It's like democracy. It's been there throughout history. It's kind of there's a little democracy here and there. It's done a thing. And capitalism or proto-capitalism, we've seen that in all sorts of different types of governmental structures. A little bit of democratic style-ish, medieval communes sort of thing. Absolute monarchies, constitutional monarchies, really wherever it can happen. So she's saying to claim that liberal democracy is like the end of history, the Francis Fukuyama sort of theory of, this is it. Everything's been growing toward liberal democracy. Mm-hmm. That's just stupid.
Because she's saying democracy was in there and those other systems too.
Yeah, democracy, we've seen it throughout history, without capitalism. And so if we've seen it throughout history, we've also seen it decline because it's not there still.
Yeah, also that.
And we've seen capitalism or its germs in more and less democratic systems throughout history as well.
Right. Okay.
So these two things aren't linked and aren't a historical trend line. She also says that democratic institutions, they can be used by capitalism, like to kind of forge a powerful state out of smaller groups or whatever, but they're not indispensable. And especially they're not indispensable in the time that she's living. She's saying, like, look at Germany, we're not exactly paying attention to democratic institutions all the time. We just had this anti-socialist law that we're just like, hey, you can't do that.
they will get rid of it whenever they want, like she was saying before, especially in times of crisis. She says militarism and the bourgeois fear of the revolutionary labor movement both push capitalism toward restricting democracy when their fear of the labor movement or their need for more militarism call them to.
I mean, yeah, that does sound familiar.
Right? So basically, yeah, don't rely on this shit. It can easily be taken away. All right, next up, Chapter 8, the conquest of political power. So more democracy, have more democracy. Doesn't that mean that workers don't need to, like, do a revolution? Because, like, you'll just have more of a say.
But, like, what is their definition of democracy?
Right. That goes back to that, form versus actual real life. Do you actually have the power? She's like, Bernstein's over here saying reform, gradualism. It's good. It's intelligent. It's methodological. It's rational versus revolution, which is emotional, which is spontaneous, which is rash. This terrible thing. He says but they're two sides of the same coin. They're both roads leading to the same place. It's all about making the smart decision. Do you want to do the stupid, quick, fast, easy thing, but bloody? Or do you want to take the prudent, slow, but prudent path in that direction?
Okay, West Wing.
Yeah, Rosa. She's like, come on. These are two different things. All right, this legislative reform throughout history has strengthened the rising class until it was strong enough to take power in a revolution. All right, so like within the structure, these laws were changed to make it better for whatever class is rising. So within feudalism, laws were changed to like give more rights to the rising bourgeoisie, to make them kind of more on equal footing with the lords and the feudal lords and everything, till they were ready to take power in bourgeois revolutions. Like those are two different things happening. She basically says that legal constitutions are the products of revolutions. Revolution is the act of political creation of those constitutions, and then legislation is the political expression of the life of a society that has already come into being. So you have to have the revolution to like change the structure, but then your legislation is once you're there, you're changing things within it.
That's maintenance.
Yeah. If you're sticking with reform, you are stuck within capitalism. You're not going to change the system because you're not going to do the revolution. So you're only confined to just changing the laws within it if you're writing off revolution as a possibility. And then it kind of comes up, okay, well, maybe capitalism, maybe it's different. Maybe that doesn't apply. Bernstein kind of argues that capitalism has a really good judicial system, which we're laughing at. I mean,
yeah, no.
but he's like, judicial rights and like courts and stuff. I don't know. It's good. It's got laws. People can elect people to make the laws. Great, right?
This grandpa must have the comfiest fucking life.
He does, yeah. So he's like, legislative reform, maybe it'll really work. And Rosa's like, no.
Are you serious, bro?
She actually says capitalism is actually uniquely bad for this idea, because class domination in our society is not actually really made up of the law so much as the economic conditions. All right. So the reason we work for our bosses isn't that we're legally conscripted to work for them. It's because if we don't, we starve. The economic realities, right? It's not really legal force. So wages, there's minimum wage laws and things like that, but most wages are determined mostly by economic factors rather than laws.
To quote Jafar, the golden rule, he who has the gold makes the rules.
Exactly. So she's like, reforming the laws are not going to change those relations of production. The things that make capitalists capitalists and workers workers, it's not going to change that. So it's not going to change the system. My man, this works on economic laws. You can't change those by just writing a different law. Like, it's not going to happen.
I'd say, too, like, there's, like, kind of a cultural law, too. You know, the cultural hegemony, I think, is very strong in capitalism.
Ooh, yes. That's actually going to come up. That's going to come up soon.
Okay, great.
Good call. Next, she kind of talks about capitalism's features as being dialectic. That's one of the things she's kind of been bringing up again and again. She says that capitalism has elements of the future society being socialism, but in a way that develops further and further away from what we think of as socialistic. So socialized production, right? Everybody working together, produce shit, but within big corporations, big conglomerates, right? Get the antithesis of what we're actually looking for, right? Or popular militias, like popular, people mass defense of the nation, but in the service of imperialism. Or increasing political participation, more suffrage and stuff like that, but within a bourgeois parliament. So she's like, you've got elements of what you want, but it's all corrupted.
It's all yeah. It's all bastardized.
All
yeah.
So she's like, okay, what this means is what we've got to be looking at is how can we extract the socialist kernel from the capitalist shell. Right? We want to be able to take the good from the bad. And so we've got this bad capitalist state. We want to be able to take the good aspects of that, which means the workers have to be able to seize power for themselves, over society, and then suppress that bad capitalist state. And she kind of talks about some quotes of Marx, of Engels, talking about basically that when the proletariat is oppressed, we're supposed to be working for reforms, working for democracy, kind of strengthening our position. But then once we're victorious, we're supposed to fully exercise that power of the dictatorship of the proletariat. Like we're carrying it out at that point.
Smash and wither.
Yeah, exactly. So just
state and revolution, but
anticipating
early.
State and revolution. Yeah, exactly. That's a pretty good thing because this is a little bit meta, but like sometimes people like to say, oh, Rosa, very critical of the Bolsheviks and everything. And she actually did have some initial criticisms, but basically like came around to their point of view. Her and Lenin were like super close in terms of ideology. They argued a lot too, frenemies a little bit.
Of course.
But like they neck and neck, Marxists at that time, but would be considered Marxist-Leninists. Last, there's a little section in this about Bernstein worrying. Looks like the type to worry, right?
He does.
He's like, what if the workers seize power too soon?
Okay.
That could be bad.
Sure, I guess.
It's not the right moment. They seize power too soon. And she says that cannot happen.
Because if they actually are to the point where they seize power, then they did it.
Right. Well, she's saying,
like,
okay.
That's the criteria.
Workers will seize power when the system has reached the point of maturity / decay, basically. When the system's bad enough. That's when they're going to actually do this thing. You don't need to be like Bernstein telling people, just chill out. Just wait. Don't go too soon. She's saying, no, man, like, it's going to happen when it happens. Plus, it's not going to be one pleasant, happy day that it happens. It's going to be kind of procrastinated. It will
it's
probably...
Revolution Day, everybody.
Right.
Everyone show up at 8 o'clock with your hammers.
The thing is, it's probably going to look like it was too early to start because revolutions are a messy thing.
Yeah, you can't plan this shit out perfectly. That's not how that works.
As soon as this shit pops off, everyone's going to be calling it crap, and that's one of the things that was attractive about the mass movements in the George Floyd protests and everything was that it was so uncertain, and you knew that even if it's the defining thing, if it's the real deal, there's going to be lots of people saying it's shit. you know? And so, like, that's one of the things is hard to tell, because when it's the real deal, they're still going to be saying, like, no, don't do it.
I mean, yeah. I mean, the Bolsheviks, they had that earlier one. What was that one?
Oh, that's
February?
The 1905. Well, they had the February Revolution. They also had the 1905 Revolution.
They had a lot of dress rehearsals.
That's the thing. Rosa also talks about that. She says there's also going to be opening volleys, basically. The premature proletarian attacks are also going to play their role. They're not bad because they play their role in driving society toward the actual revolutionary moment. Like that 1905 one, Lenin called it the dress rehearsal for the Russian Revolution, or the February Revolution, where you had the Social Democrats basically take power and buck around for a while.
Those revolutions weed out fuckers like Bernstein who are like, well, let's just do a little bit, and then that does not work, and then you have the real revolution of like, okay, that was stupid, let's do it for real this time.
Yeah, so I mean, you have that in the Russian example. You have that in when Castro attacked the Moncada barracks in Cuba, and then he gets arrested, goes on trial, and everything like that. Was a failed attempt at a real revolution that he was trying. This is July 26th movement and everything spawned off of that. You're gonna have these false starts, but that's fine
because they prove the point, I guess.
Yes, yeah.
It's not a total failure as in like we shouldn't have done that. It was a failure and they're like, yeah, we didn't succeed.
Right.
But it got more people to our cause.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not really a failure. It's just, well, it is a failure, but it's not like we shouldn't have tried. It's that we lost.
Exactly. It's not a regret.
Yeah. Rosa puts it, since the proletariat is not in the position to seize power in any other way than prematurely, since the proletariat is absolutely obliged to seize power once or several times too early before it can maintain itself in power for good, the objection to the premature conquest of power is at bottom nothing more than a general opposition to the aspiration of the proletariat to possess itself of state power.
Yeah, I mean, there's not going to be a fucking comet in the sky that's like, today's the day, guys. Like, we're not going to get our fucking star charts to figure this one out. Like, it's just going to happen. It's going to be weird, and it's going to happen.
And she's like, you got to be on board for even the ones that don't look good to really be in the game. I mean, otherwise, you're just a naysayer. All right, moving right along to number 9. Collapse. Everyone's favorite thing, collapse.
Well, if it's the collapse of capitalism, I'm in.
It is. So
Great.
A lot of this is a big recap of how poor old Bernstein,
this motherfucker,
he
can't catch a break.
He dug a hole for himself.
When did he die? What if he died right after this?
He did not. When did he die? All right, Eddie Bernstein.
Oh, no, 1932. He lived longer than her, right?
He's
damn,
by a lot.
Because he just looked like such a grandpa. I thought maybe he'd read this, his little grandpa heart would give out like, oh, she got me.
Nope, died in 1932. Long life. But this is a story all about how Bernstein got from capitalism won't collapse to I'm no longer a Marxist, no longer a materialist, no longer a believer in even the existence of classes at all. Cool. And actually, everything is fine and getting better.
Okay, so you're a fucking capitalist.
Yeah. No, she's just like, this whole chapter is just like, this is a big L for Bernstein, basically. And people who think like him. And so, again, not all about Bernstein. Who cares? He died a long time ago. But the people who support him or the people who carry forward those ideas of like, let's be nice. Let's do things the right way.
Or even the people who say, communism is unrealistic. It's a utopia, blah, 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 and want to work within the system. It's people of that ilk who say like, oh, we can fix this.
Yes. People who think they're being reasonable. And she says, basically, this guy, he abandoned scientific socialism and it makes him adrift. He thinks himself intelligent. Here's her quote, which I like. He thinks he succeeds in expressing human, general, abstract science, abstract liberalism, abstract morality. But since the society of reality is made up of classes which have diametrically opposed interests, aspirations, and conceptions, a general human science and social questions, and abstract liberalism and abstract morality are at present illusions, pure utopia. The science, the democracy, the morality considered by Bernstein as general, human, and merely the dominant science, dominant democracy, and dominant morality, that is bourgeois science, bourgeois democracy, bourgeois morality. Basically, she's saying the dude is operating on what he assumes is common sense for everybody. But what is common sense but the dominant ideology of the dominant class?
Ursula K. Le Guin said it best. The divine right of kings seemed inevitable.
Yeah.
You know, seemed like it would go on forever. And like, if you're operating on a system, like, you have no reason to believe it's ever going to change.
Right. And this is what you're saying earlier about Gramsci's like cultural hegemony, of this idea of like there being an accepted common sense. Everyone can agree to this, but really that ideology is the ruling ideology of the ruling class.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so not only that, Bernstein, she says, he attacks dialectics, he supports materialism, and that's bad. It helps the bourgeoisie. That's a really, low energy thing to do.
It's not a good look.
Yeah, not a good look. When he directs his keenest arrows against our dialectic system, he is really attacking the specific mode of thought employed by the conscious proletariat in its struggle for liberation. It is an attempt to break the sword that has helped the proletariat to pierce the darkness of its future. It's an attempt to shatter the intellectual arm with the aid of which the proletariat, though materially under the yoke of the bourgeoisie, is yet unable to triumph over the bourgeoisie. For it's our dialectical system that shows to the working class the transitory nature of this yoke, proving to the workers the inevitability of their victory, and is already realizing a revolution in the domain of thought.
It is bad strategy to shoot at a sword with an arrow.
True. Yeah.
That's not going to work.
DMs out there, if your player ever asks, I would like to sunder the enemy's weapon with my bow and arrow, just say yes and make them roll with disadvantage.
For real. You better get
easy.
2 20s in a row for that to work.
And so that wraps up chapter 9. Bernstein taking L's all the way down the list.
Poor guy. I mean, I don't feel that bad for him, but it's
no,
funny.
he's kind of
a loser.
Yeah, these are some stupid ideas. All right, last chapter though, chapter 10, opportunism in theory and practice. And here's where she just takes a final shit on Bernstein et al.
She's like a cat, like kicking the litter over the shit now. Like, now to bury my shit.
Yeah. All right, Bernstein, opportunists like him, scientific socialism, they hate it because it limits what they can do. They're trying to say, oh, what if we do this? And people are like, Marx, Engels, like, don't do that.
Come on.
It says not to do that. And they're like, yeah, but, right? So they came up with a theory, all their own, to be one of the cool kids to fit in and say, yeah, but our theory, it's good. And she's like, Bernstein, this is the first sample we got of it. How'd it do? Complete failure. She's like, it's incompatible with Marxism. It's incompatible with socialism in general. Basically, it pushes the workers to support the bourgeoisie and to paralyze the socialist movement itself.
She just said your book is trash.
She said it's trash. She said you're just using recycled old ideas and cobbling them together. Damn. And those ideas might have been like fine for previous eras and workers' movements or whatever in the past. But we're past that now, and bro, everybody is using scientific socialism. Like, what are you still doing using this shit?
Wow. I think she'd give negative stars if she could.
Yeah, it's overall a terrible review of Bernstein. And she says this is part of a bigger struggle. In proletarian revolutions, they're rough. And she quotes Marx here from the 18th Brumaire, one of his writings about like the French Revolution and all this stuff. I like it. I always like Marx quotes, so I'm going to put it into the record here.
Let's hear it.
Bourgeois revolutions, wrote Marx a half-century ago, like those of the 18th century, rush onward rapidly from success to success. Their stage effects outbid one another, Men and things seem to be set in flaming brilliance. Ecstasy is the prevailing spirit, but they are short-lived. They reach their climax speedily, and then society relapses into a long fit of nervous reaction before it learns how to appropriate the fruits of its period of feverish excitement. Proletarian revolutions, on the contrary, such as those of the 19th century, criticize themselves constantly interrupt themselves in their own course, come back to what seems to have been accomplished in order to start anew, scorn with cruel thoroughness the half measures, weaknesses, and meanness of their first attempts, seem to throw down their adversary only to enable him to draw fresh strength from the earth, and again to rise up against them in one more gigantic stature, constantly recoil in fear before the undefined monster magnitude of their own objects, until finally that situation is created which renders all retreat impossible, and conditions themselves cry out, Hic Rhodus, hic salta, here is the rose, and here we must dance.
Ooh, okay. I wasn't expecting Latin and a dance invite from that, but I'll take it.
So, I don't know, I like that criticism, basically, of proletarian revolutions. Put us on blast.
I mean, that applies to the movement as a whole. Like, we are a hand-wringing, fretting little bunch.
Yeah. We make monsters out of everything that we cannot possibly surmount. We let our adversaries right back up as soon as we got them down again. And
yeah, I mean, that's totally how bourgeois revolutions are painted. You know, think the American Revolution, the romanticizing of all that. I mean, Les Mis, great musical, but romanticized a revolution that did not work.
Yeah. So you said, what stars does Rosa give Bernstein?
Negative.
Yeah, negative. So her last concluding statement here. For only dialectics and the materialist conception of history, magnanimous as they are, could make Bernstein appear as an unconscious, predestined instrument, by means of which the rising working class expresses its momentary weakness, but upon closer inspection, it throws aside contemptuously and with pride.
She's saying we're going to throw this whole man out?
Throw this whole man and his whole idea out. And throw it aside, basically, with a smile, with contempt.
Wow, she threw him in the dumpster.
She's like, this makes us look weak right now, but thanks to dialectics, thanks to materialist conception of history, we're going to take this, we're going to learn from it, we're going to be like, hey, this dude was fucking wrong.
That was bullshit. Let's do the opposite of this.
Yeah, and we're going to crumple it up, throw it in the trash, and laugh.
Damn, dude. Fucking killed that guy.
Actually, he killed her, but...
Technically, yeah. But intellectually.
Yeah.
She nuked him from orbit.
Yeah, this was a glassing. For sure. All right, so not what'd you think of the reading itself, but the content of it.
I mean, even the content was still a little dense. Like, I had to have a lot of translations in the moment of like, okay, fuck, what's the mode of production? Like, that kind of shit.
Yeah.
Just very economics heavy, which is, not my strong suit. But I still like the content in terms of like the kernel of it, which is that like, as tempting as it is, as maybe idealistic as Bernstein himself admits as it is, to want to reform our way out of this, to vote our way out of this, to even union our way out of this, it's gonna kind of have to come to blows, guys. We can't like avoid that.
Yeah.
Like, it is inevitable.
I like the kind of the yes and notion of it is like, we do need to do those things.
Yeah, I like that. And she's not at all, shitting on those ideas. Like, and we are not either, let's be clear. It's like, yeah, do them for sure. But like, also keep your eye on the prize.
Yeah, realize what is your actual goal in doing those things. Don't ever confuse yourself into thinking like, oh, if I elect this right person, if we get this one union demand, like, this is good. But it's not what you're actually trying to do. You have to keep your real goal in mind. Like you said, keep the eye on the prize. You got to get, that has to be there because otherwise you're just treading water.
I mean, Bernstein, as much as we said, don't focus on him individually, he's a really good case study for this because he starts out saying like, oh no, I'm totally socialist, and like, I want to reform our way to it, though. By the end of it, we're like, this guy's not even a socialist. He doesn't believe in any of the things we believe in. He wants capitalism to continue and thinks it can continue. Like, that's not a socialist, y'all.
Right. Yeah. And that's, I think, why this, I don't think it has to be this long, but I think that's why she takes this methodical approach, is like, here's where my man started. Let me take down each one of these things in order. And so by the end of it, you just have this rap sheet of like, he said this, and so that means this, so that means this, so that means this.
Receipts.
So yeah, it's just like, he basically says, no, I'm not a socialist, you know?
Like, that is the danger of relying too much on these methods within the system, is you start seeing the system as unchangeable. You say, I have to work within the system is good.
It's common sense that system is going to be there, will always be there, immutable.
Yeah. Yep.
Rosa, I appreciated the read. This was good. I can't say that it was like the best written piece.
Rosa, you can use an editor.
For brevity, but like, I liked it overall. I found myself really thinking about, and like we were talking about, it does seemingly apply to our modern times. I mean, we still deal with people who are saying, oh, you got to rule out violence, first and foremost, and then we can talk about how we're going to change society. And it's like, how do you actually think that's going to happen?
They're not going to rule out violence.
Yeah.
Even if you vote, they're not going to rule out violence.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I think that's a good message even today. Even if you're going with just the abbreviated version, I think it's a good message to have.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, maybe it is beautiful in German. German listeners, let us know. Maybe it's poetry.
They all chime in and like, it sucks worse in German. No, it's twice as long.
It's actually really hard. Okay. What are we doing next week?
Next week, I believe we are meeting up to shoot the shit.
Perfect.
So if you're a fan of our more organized episodes, sorry.
Take a week off.
Yeah. But we'll catch up on various happenings and whatnot, all that stuff.
Sounds great.
Cool. All right. I'll see you then. Don't fall into any pits of revisionism in between now and then.
I'll try not to.
Don't let anyone sweet talk you into abandoning Marxism.
No, because Rose is going to fucking haunt my ass and, like, tear it up.
Are you serious? Did you hear what they said about historical
She's
materialism?
Fucking take me to task. She's going to publish a pamphlet on Twitter.
Posthumous pamphlet.
All right.
See ya.
Bye. Hey there, comrades. Just jumping in to remind you of all of our social media. We are on Twitter at teachcommunism, Instagram at teachmecommunism. You can shoot us an email. That's teachmecommunism@gmail.com. Any of those places are good to send us an episode suggestion or a question, anything you think would be useful feedback for us, or just your admiration. If you want to admire us in a public manner, and you should, you can go to Apple Podcasts to give us a review. It is the best way to help people find the show. Love when people rate and review us. Please do both. We are also on YouTube, if that's how you prefer to listen to podcasts, or if you know someone that's the only way they'll listen to podcasts, send them to our page. And we have a Patreon. For $5 a month, you get access to our notes for each week's episode, including the backlog of notes, which is a very handy resource for up-and-coming commies. And at the end of the year, all of the funds from Patreon will be given to local mutual aid in the DFW area. So, ain't going to line our pockets. Finally, we have merch. Check us out at TeePublic. You can find shirts and I believe also stickers and magnets and all kinds of fun stuff with catchphrases from the show or episode art, stuff like that. The link to that store is in the show notes, so check that out. Okay, that's all the internet. Join us next time for another episode of Teach Me Communism, where the class struggle is always in session. Bye, y'all.